Welcome to Mystical Messages. I am Hilary Harley, your podcast host. I am a soul guide and astrologer. Mystical Messages is your podcast gateway to discover and learn more about the realm beyond the veil, including all things intuitive, metaphysical, and the healing arts. To learn more about my work or to book a session with me, please visit hilaryharley.com. Today, we are discussing mediumship and consciousness. And I am so delighted to have my very special guest, Emily Grote, to join me and learn more about this topic. And I would like to say welcome to you, Emily.
I'm delighted to be with you. Thanks for having me.
Before I get too far into our conversation, I just want to say Emily can be reached. You're New York City based. Okay.
Talk to people all over the world, though.
Yes. Well, that's the beauty of the age that we live in. We can reach everybody through cyberspace. So, but if anybody does want an in-person session, certainly you're in New York City. Okay, so it's Emily, and the last name is Grote, Grote. So her website is emilygrote.com. And also her email is emily@emilygrote.com.
Awesome.
So, Emily, talk to me about how your journey ensued. I think we have some similarities in terms of our journeys began with a healing issue or an illness.
Yeah.
And healing was part of it. Healing our illness was part of that journey.
Absolutely. It's so long and we only have so much time. So I'll sort of truncate the first part. I really kicked off this journey with a mentor, my very good friend. She was also my landlady. And she was really the first person that I met where I wasn't embarrassed, ashamed, or what have you, to talk about consciousness, to talk about metaphysical things, to talk about my own psychic experiences. And so that was a very pivotal relationship for me. And I was in relationship with her, and we saw each other probably multiple times a week, would have lunch, but I never connected that she was so pivotal to my development until much later. And around 2012, I left my corporate job. And like many people who are able, if you're able, that I was able to make this leap. I thought, oh, this is fantastic. I'm going to enter this new chapter in my life. And isn't this so wonderful? And I did a bunch of creative things. And by 2013, even though I was trying to keep some balls in the air, I was absolutely crashing. I just
physically crashing.
I lost my basically, what I think the best way for me to look at it in hindsight is I had so much anxiety and stress. And I think my awareness and my consciousness also knew the massive change that was coming. And so my body was just in shock and shutting down. And the way that looked for me so this was 2012, I left my job 2013 and I was crashing. My entire endocrine system just bottomed out. My adrenals were shot. My thyroid was shot. All my sex hormones were shot. And I literally, the way it manifested, anybody who's ever had adrenal problems, is you basically lose your ability to go to sleep. And so,
so anxiety?
It's basically like anxiety on steroids. And, when the adrenals tank, they're not producing enough cortisol. So I went through a wonky stage. I was actually still working in the corporate world, and I didn't realize that at the time. I was actually even thinking about this the other day. I used to go to the vitamin shop and buy these little lozenges that were stress reduction lozenges, and they helped a lot. I used to pop those in the middle of the night, and I'd be able to go back to sleep.
Oh, wow.
And I didn't connect that, hello, ding dong, you need to see the doctor. I was very much of my ilk and my family and just a lot of denial and
well, in society
oh, there
too,
you go.
this
That too.
Expectation that we just keep plowing on, and the body is saying ding ding ding, hello,
Ding, ding,
hello,
and I didn't pick up the phone. So I was helping my body to fall back to sleep at night with these supplements, and then in the daytime around 2-3 o'clock in the afternoon I'd have to leave work, go get a cup of coffee just to get through the day. So I had this weird cycle that had already started and I was oblivious. So by 2013 I was in this total crash and burn cycle where I'd be up for 24 to 48 hours totally unable to sleep, and then I'd crash for a night. And then you can imagine this was just the good, quote unquote, good part about it. I was out of work, so I could crash. I could literally just completely collapse. And this sadly lasted for quite some time. I, of course, by that time was seeing doctors. They tried to give me antidepressants, and I was like, you've known me for so many years. I'm not depressed. For me, I didn't connect it to depression or anxiety. It was just, I've entered this incredible chapter in my life where I could do whatever I want and I can't get off the starting line at all. And it was just horrendous. And so anyway, between 2013 and 2018, this was pretty much my cycle, crash and burn, did tons of things. I tried antidepressants. I tried Klonopin. I developed a dependence.
Oh, that's hardcore.
Klonopin. Well, when you can't sleep for 48 hours, you're pretty much willing to do anything.
That's true.
I was like, I'll drink gin till I fall asleep. I don't care. Like, I will do anything to fall asleep.
Right.
And none of it worked. None of it. And even the Klonopin, like I would sleep, but then of course I would go through, because I wasn't using it every night. I was using it every other night. And I developed this sort of, I forget what they call it, but it's basically like an intermittent dependence upon it. So whenever I did need sleep, I'd have to use it. Doesn't mean it worked all the time. And then because I was in this sort of intermittent cycle with it, I would get all these horrendous, basically every symptom I was trying to avoid would come and hit me every 3 days. It was
wow. So were
bad.
you in contact with your mentor at that time? Was she your landlady?
Absolutely. She wasn't my landlady. She was actually only my landlady for about 1.5 years or 2 years up until 98. So
okay.
So she was in my life.
Okay.
But she was, totally clueless to help me. This is not her. That's not her world.
Right.
So she was my salvation, really, if anything, in that time, just a loving presence for me, where a lot of other people in my life were like, what's the matter with you? Because when you're able to function, every one of your listeners probably knows this. Anybody who's ever dealt with depression and anxiety, you're functional. You can get up, you can brush your teeth. If you push yourself, you can go grocery shopping, but you're not living. You're in a shell. You're in a shell of yourself. And so fast forward to 2018, I finally connected. There was an adult, I'll just call it adult onset trauma, a kind of a massive turning point in my family between my father and my sister and even my mother connected. It's sort of this crazy situation. And that was happening concurrent to me finding neuroplasticity. So I've always known, at least intuitively, even if I wasn't able to fully embody it or practice it, I've always known, body, mind, it makes sense, right? Your body is this expression, literally your body is this metaphor for everything that you've ever thought, every belief you hold dear, every judgment you have. It's just this walking, talking expression of your psyche. And so knowing that on the one hand, but yet crashing and burning on the other, it's sort of like living this dichotomy, like how do I absolutely weave all this together? And so the bridge for me to figure that out was practicing the principles of neuroplasticity, which is literally like the boot camp of the mind. It's catching every single thought you think and basically applying inquiry to it.
Okay. Yeah. Because I want to make sure we define what neuroplasticity is for anybody who is not familiar with it.
Very basic level neuroplasticity is the ability for your brain, the organ of your brain, to develop new neural connections based on new information or even old information.
Okay.
So one of the principles. It's a science. Everybody can look it up. It is science. It's not metaphysical. It is absolute science. So what they've discovered is that the brain, or your brain and I tend to distinguish, right? There's the organ of your brain, and then your mind are all the thoughts you think, right? So that's the abstraction of everything that's happening. And so the brain doesn't know if you're remembering a traumatic memory or whether you're remembering a beautiful vacation in Hawaii. The brain cannot distinguish that was in the past. Biochemically, physiologically, your entire body, if you are thinking a trauma thought or whether you're thinking a Hawaii thought, your body responds chemically to those memories as if it's happening right now. So I literally used that as my program to heal my body. And so that took I had absolute immediate relief.
Wow.
But the brain is a funky organ because it follows its own timeline, and healing follows anybody on a healing journey, knows it follows its own timeline. And I think where most people get sidetracked or lost or frustrated and give up on all that stuff is it's not consistent. It's
right.
like that jaggedy line where it's high, low, high, low, high, low. And if you just stick with it and kind of wait out and not take the lows personally, right? It's not like this, I've done it wrong, or, not judge yourself in the midst of all that.
Yeah. Self-judgment and self-criticism is huge. And I just want to say, 2 steps forward, 1 step back.
Yep.
And
that was my experience.
Yeah. And we really don't realize how far we come with those 2 steps.
True.
And it's just inching forward. And then,
even that step back is not really, you still have the knowledge of the 2 steps.
Correct.
And you're bringing that awareness and that knowledge. Wait a minute. It was really good 2 days ago. And now I'm crashing and burning. But I can remember, right? So even with the 1 step back, you're never really lost because you have the awareness of what you've experienced, which is so powerful.
Right. And often I would not even call it a crash and burn or a step back, but it's a pause.
Yeah, that's a great way
to integrate what we're learning. And we don't even think we're learning, we just, because as human beings, we're so driven to keep pushing forward.
And where is that drive coming from? Is that really innately ours? And I love your word pause. That's just perfect because, right, the 2 steps forward, 1 step back or crash and burn, right? There's like an ounce of judgment even in those words, right? I've done something wrong. There's
Absolutely.
a wrongness about it, right? Yeah. Pause is perfect because you're right, integrating. We are applying this sort of aggression or this drive to the healing journey. And wait a minute, where's that coming from?
Exactly.
The body is on its own timeline. Our consciousness is on its own timeline. And can we receive that?
Yes, it's absolute. That's exactly the right frame and word. Receive, allow, permit, embrace, because that's part of the natural cycle. And just, I use with people that come to me, and I'm sure with your clients as well, people get so frustrated because, especially this year, that there's a lot of fits and starts and halts and, grinding of gears. And I have to remind myself that it's like the natural cycle. Winter is part of the natural cycle, the death and rebirth, and the pause, because if you're constantly in forward motion, there's really not a time to just sleep and rest. And that has to be integrated as part of the cycle.
Yeah. Great word, integrate. Yeah, truly. So that, I want to say that experience of neuroplasticity and getting myself back on track, that probably got me maybe 70% to well-being and health. And I was still at the end of 2.5 years of like truly deliberate, very, I don't want to say the word's not rigorous, but committed, super committed to that work. An hour a day of like going through memories and really happy things and all that kind of stuff. So my brain absolutely responded, and I was definitely on an upward trajectory, but I was still managing. It was so funny. I was talking to a friend of mine who was also in this healing vein, and I was dealing with a lot of basal cell carcinoma, which is a non-malignant skin cancer.
Oh, wow.
And I, over the course between that adult onset trauma in 2018, my face just exploded, and I got lesion. And I used a holistic kind of over-the-counter medication, which side note for everybody, make your own decisions. Not right for everybody. A lot of people do Mohs surgery, but they were coming so quickly in my life that the thought of doing, multiple surgeries, it was not for me. So I used this cream. It worked effectively. But then I was in this cycle of like getting rid of a spot, another one would come, getting rid of a spot, another one would come. And this went on for 3 years. And I was talking to this friend of mine that I just mentioned, and I didn't even remotely connect the skin cancer to also the neuroplasticity journey. And she was like, do you think all this is related? And I was like pointing at my face, and I was like, oh, what? Like it didn't even, we can be so oblivious even within our own bodies and our lives. So she helped me sort of connect the dots there. And by this time, I'm 3 years. That was between 18, 19, I guess, in 18 to 19 to 20. Yeah, to 2021, I was like, okay. After my 6th basal cell carcinoma lesion, I was like, I think it's time to look at the fact that there's emotional roots to this. And I literally just Googled, what are the emotional roots of basal cell carcinoma? The very first hit was the National Institutes of Health. And it said, I could not, I almost fell out of my chair. It literally said, multiple basal cell carcinoma lesions are directly connected to a high ACE score, which is your ACE scores for anybody who does, you can just Google it, ACE. So your ACE score is your adverse childhood experiences. So a high ACE score combined with adult onset trauma, 2018, results in multiple skin cancer lesions.
There's some mind-body connection.
Totally. And I was like, oh. So then in 2021, I just buckled down. I said, okay, how do I get to the other side of this?
Mm-hmm.
And I did, for about 3 months, I did traditional therapy, a lot of breath work. It was not for me. So traditional therapy did not help me heal my body. And then I moved on to inner child work. That was super enlightening, brought me right back to a moment when I was like 3 or 4 years old. And that's when I disassociated from my body. There we go. That's the nucleus. That's the genesis of when I disconnected, because it was way more important for me to pay attention to my unhealthy, unstable family environment. Mm-hmm. And that's probably where I also became super intuitive. I was probably more intuitive. Well, whatever, that's probably from birth. But anyway, so it was like, oh, and I even remember my mother. I remember feeling so seen by my mother, because she told me as a very young child, she said, you're so perceptive. And now I'm like, yeah, I'm so perceptive because I have to keep myself safe, in this environment, in this chaos. And so anyway, and then I found my way to an organization called Access Consciousness. So this was really from like January to June of 2021. And there's an acquaintance of mine. I went to one of her, just a 1-hour workshop, and she gave us some tools, just verbal processing tools. And the first tool was, what else is possible?
Mm-hmm.
And the only reason I went in that direction, because she embodied so much joy.
Mm-hmm.
Is she sitting there smoking, or she's drinking, or she's doing something? I'm like, what is she doing? How is she this embodiment of joy? And I want that. I want that in my life. And she was sort of my gateway. And in just that particular night, I was struggling to fall asleep, no surprise, although things had gotten better at that point. And sometimes I'll listen to, like a lot of people, white noise, what have you, but my phone was dying. So close to midnight, I have to go downstairs to the kitchen to get my other phone that was charging. As I'm going downstairs, I remembered, damn it, I left my cat outside. And like I am in New York City, and so I've got to bring my cat in every night. Now I'm
Right.
thinking, oh my God, it's almost midnight. And how am I going to, you can't corral a cat, right? All the stories about cat ownership, right? And I'm starting to go spiral, into
Oh,
what I've
yeah.
always done. I'm panicking. Now I'm not going to be, woe is me. And I stopped midway on the stairs and I thought, oh, I have a new tool. What else is possible? And I didn't even say it out loud. I just thought it. And
Wow.
I instantly got 10 pounds lighter. Just like I started to vibrate a little bit. I was like, that's amazing. We're in a duplex. So I walk into the kitchen. My kitchen faces my backyard. And just as I'm entering the kitchen, there's incredible moonlight in the backyard illuminating the back. I see my cat walking towards the back door as if to meet me.
Wow.
And I'm
no hurting cats.
Never. I didn't have to call his name. I was like, this is incredible. And from there, I was just like, okay, what else is possible? And of course, I was able to go to sleep. So that was sort of the genesis, the beginning of, for me to really understand, really connect, even though I'm a psychic medium professionally since 2016. Clearly, I'm an energy worker my entire life, but I wasn't connecting it to myself personally, my own energy. And just, so that was like, oh, that's amazing. More, please. How do I keep doing this?
It's like the shoemaker, the cobbler's children, and we all do that. I look at my chart all the time, my astrological chart, and oh yeah, that's why I'm going through this.
I make so much sense now. Exactly.
Doesn't it though?
It really does. And so from there, it's an energy work system that I use. It's, these spots on your head, 32 spots. And now I do it on my clients. I get it done weekly. And before that, I should say I was a Reiki level 2. I never connected the same way to Reiki in the same way I do to this particular system that I'm using.
And remind us the name of the system.
Sure. It's called Access Consciousness.
Access Consciousness.
Yes.
Okay. And so are there facilitators, teachers?
All over the world.
Okay.
Oh, it's amazing. That's kind of what I love about it too. It's like, what? It's a global, I'm meeting people from India. I'm meeting people from South Africa. Just amazing. There's people all over the world.
So you can go online and tune in. Okay.
Yeah. Yeah. And I think what's wild about it is I think there's actually more facilitators overseas than there actually are in the US. Don't quote me on that. But
that's not surprising in a way, because Europe is advanced with alternative modalities in a way that it's just sort of getting here.
That's absolutely true. So it's a system I love. I'm working towards more certifications because they've got a lot of nooks and crannies, like talking about bodies, talking about families, talking about money. So there's a lot of buckets that they sort of work their magic in, and I use the tools every day, and it's gotten me to that place of joy. And I just continue to say what else is possible. And my skin, skin experience. I'll sew all that up. I was in a workshop with this facilitator, the one that I've been working with since the beginning. And she just looked at me one day in the middle of this workshop, and she said, "Is this yours? The skin cancer?" And I was like, "What?" What? My brain just sort of exploded. I was like, wait, what? And as soon as she asked me the question, I got the picture in my mind of the person whose bag basically I was carrying. And I thought, oh my God, just that acknowledgement meant I didn't have to do it anymore.
Right. That is amazing.
It's incredible. And so I acknowledged that I was basically literally facing something that someone in my life was unwilling to face. But the key is that I was also judging them for it. I was angry. I was embittered about it. So these two sort of moving parts. And once I realized, oh, I don't have to face it. And A, I don't have to face it. And B, I do not have to judge them.
Carry. Because when we judge and criticize, we carry their stuff.
The weight.
The weight of it.
Yes. And literally in 2.2 seconds, she asked me that question. I put it all together. And I thank God we were actually on the beach here in Brooklyn, in Brighton Beach. And there's a photograph of me with this realization. My arms are thrown up in the air. My legs are like, I'm levitating practically. And they got this picture of me having this experience of massive, massive aha. And within 3 days, skin cancer was gone.
That is
it was
miraculous and remarkable.
Miraculous and remarkable. And you know what? And normal. That's what I want to tell people is when you've got your consciousness working on your behalf and you're not fighting. Notice I had to spend 2.5 years in a neuroplasticity training just to train my brain not to go to trauma and drama. And when you allow yourself to, look at things from a different point of view, ask questions, it can facilitate so much change in your body and your life.
That is incredibly valuable. Thank you, because training your brain it's all about perspective.
Absolutely.
When we shift our perspective from the stories, the programming, the conditioning, and when you think about it, doesn't matter, male, female, whoever we are, we're raised with consciousness and conditioning and programming these stories, not just from our parents, but their parents and their parents. And it's really, when they talk about generational trauma, it's true. And,
it's so funny you say that, because I've literally, I think I'm 12th generation American on my mother's side, less generations on my father's side, but still. That's, we're directly related to the Puritans. You can't get much more rigid in points of view about bodies, about life, about morality, about da-da-da-da-da. And that absolutely carries through in our bodies, in our psyches. It's a lot. It's a lot to unravel, but it can end with you.
Yes. And so that is the pivot point of our conversation, because when we accept responsibility for healing, and we're all healers, each of us on this planet. Some of us heal through banking. Some of us heal through selling cars, sales and marketing. There are myriad forms. But the point is, when we accept our joy, what lights our soul up, I call it the yuck to yum scale. And, you mentioned this woman earlier who was just vibrating with joy. And it's like, you can tell when somebody is living their passion, driven by their soul, because they
show up different.
Yes, they're alive in all they're alive in all the fullest possible ways. And so as we heal ourselves, those frequencies go out, the ripples go out into the world with everybody we touch. And it's interesting that there are no accidents. Yesterday, a friend of mine and I hadn't seen her in a month or so, and we were having lunch and we were laughing and laughing and laughing. And the couple next to us at the next table over said, "It is so nice to hear people laughing and having a good time." Wonderful. Because part of what we, especially in this critical mass moment that we're living in, there's such it's darkness, and we have to go through this. It's the dark night of the soul for our world right now, but we have to move through it and to connect with joy consciously and say, I'm taking the afternoon off and I'm, going to go dig in my garden or, play on the beach or go see a movie. That's really important to schedule those moments for ourselves.
And I want to just touch on you and your friend and laughing at lunchtime. And, maybe if that were 20 years ago, you two would have made yourselves smaller, right? You would have dialed it down. You would have not wanted to disturb anybody, right? And what permission were you, just in your very being, for everyone around you to cut loose, to be completely ridiculous? So you become the invitation by your willingness to put down the cultural conditioning that says be small, right? It's
be ladylike.
Be ladylike, right? Whatever that means, right? Yeah, because we're all the same. And yeah, so just it's contagious. That's the one thing I want to just absolutely, connect to people is even if you are like me back in 2013 to 2018, I was literally on a couch for 5 years.
Yeah.
I was horizontal. I could not function. I could drop. The only things I was capable of doing were dropping my kids off at school and picking them up maybe on time and making them dinner and maybe a grocery shopping trip. That was kind of my capacities. And so if you're in that space, don't judge yourself for being in the space, but what more is available? What more? Yeah, it's a lot. It's a lot.
So in terms of how you came out, how did that happen as mediumship? And we've pursued the consciousness facilitation to a greater degree in this conversation, but the mediumship, was that co-happening?
Absolutely. And gosh, I just listening to your podcast with the other medium folks, they were really incredible. And one of them said something about, this was happening to me when I was a child. And it made me really start to think like, did I have those capacities as a child? And I'm absolutely certain I was touched, by a pixie or, who knows what, there's some sort of supernatural. I had an absolute commitment and fascination with nature. I'll never forget. It's just let ants just crawl up my arms, like not a whole lot of toys in the house at the time, right? So ants were my friends. The trees were my friends. I remember being absolutely apoplectic when the tree in front of our house had to be, for whatever reason, taken down. So I had a connection to nature. And I also had a memory of my birth, I call it my pre-birth memory. So very, very long story short, I had the memory of it, and I wasn't even clear, like, this come at me as a dream, what have you. But in this vision, I am this basically awareness or this drone, and I could see my parents walking up it was almost like a mansion, or like a double staircase, leading towards the center in this massive hall. And they were carrying on one side of the staircase, they were carrying a bed. And my mother was at one end, my father was at the other, and I could tell my mother was pregnant. So I had this memory, quote unquote. I think I was probably young puberty when I shared it with my mother, that I had this memory. And she said, I was pregnant with you when that.
Oh, my heavens.
Yeah. So not necessarily mediumship, but certainly psychic awareness or whatever. That my being, maybe that's the moment I chose my parents, who knows, but something.
That's really interesting.
Really interesting. Something very interesting happened. And then even my actual birth, like I could sort of see it happening and hear, like they had to call for an EKG and for someone else, like an electrocardiogram. And my mother, so it's like I can see my mother in a hospital, she's giving birth, and then I can hear the EKG. And those are my initials, Emily Ketling Grote. So my mother at the time was like, isn't that interesting, right? They're calling out my initials, and here I am literally being born at that very moment. So interesting little synchronicities, right?
Wow.
But I don't think I had a mediumship experience until I was 16. I think it was 1986. And my maternal grandmother had died. And she lived up in Maine, and I was in New Jersey. So there's, huge physical distance between us. We didn't see her all that often, but I had a real psychic connection to her because she was an artist, and I fancied myself an artist. And so I don't know whether that was my imagination or what, but regardless, the day that I had found out that she died, she came to me in a dream. And it was such a simple, I was walking in the context of the dream, I was walking in a downtown or town area, and I was doesn't matter, I was sort of dressed in old style clothing, like pioneer clothing, and I was knocking on the doors asking if anybody wanted a babysitter because I wanted to make money. And she opened the door, and there she was. And I knew she was deceased, but yet she's standing right in front of me. And I just fell into her arms. I just wept and wept and wept. And it was closure. It was a visitation, what have you. And I think she might have come one other time. That's a little bit more fuzzy. But since then, I won't even say at that point I was like, oh, I'm a medium. No, that didn't. I actually had to sort of connect the dots, and it comes through meditation, and and sort of facilitate myself in that respect. So now I sort of understand which levers to pull in order to sort of facilitate that stuff or go in that direction, or allow it is probably the better word. And that really kicked into high gear. I got married. I found Marge. I had that incredible experience of meeting my mentor, Marge, and got married, had kids. And I want to say every time I had a child, that sort of helped turn the volume up on all this stuff a little bit.
Doesn't it though?
It really does. It absolutely does. And by the time I had my final kid in 2011, I was already contemplating. He was 2011, and then 2012, I left that corporate experience. So I knew I was going in a new direction. He was sort of this, each kid for me was like a different chapter of my life. As far as my working and my own becoming. And I was on the one hand terrified, but also on the other hand, super excited. And I was breastfeeding him, and I was lying down on my master bed. I had him sort of tucked in close to me, and I was in that woozy, dreamy state. And out of nowhere, I felt a rap on the top of my head. It was physical, and it absolutely freaked me out. And I'm looking around the room, and I'm literally saying, what was that? And I thought to myself, I had this very
who's here?
Who's here? But also like my ego showed up like, ooh, maybe that means I'm enlightened.
I
literally was like, but I don't feel enlightened. But enlightenment is supposed to feel like, I have no problem.
The angels.
Absolutely. And I was like, but I feel normal. But I think that was literally a pivot point for me. And it was whatever that energy was that showed up and did that. It absolutely facilitated more, more spirit, more this, more that.
Well, and that's crown chakra.
Right.
And tap, tap, you're on now.
Right. Bingo. You asked for it. Here it comes.
Right. You ready? And it's interesting, the moment that it happens, because I used to get, for you, it was this precious, precious moment of nurturing.
Right.
And you're not just feeding a human being, you're feeding your soul as well. You're doing a very soulful maternal task. But I used to get these, and I still get every now and then, but when I was going through writing my book 10 years ago, I would get these downloads while I was doing dishes. And I was like the most mundane occupation you could possibly be doing. And that's what I think is really helpful to remember, is that enlightenment, there's a great book by Jack Kornfield, After the Bliss, Then the Laundry.
Right.
And just to bear in mind that enlightenment, it's like wax on, wax off from the Karate Kid.
Totally.
It's in the process of doing it every day, and then you're ready. Right. And it comes in. And
I love how you described you were doing the dishes, because I have had an identical experience that maybe we'll get into, but my mentor Marge tells the story about she would be washing the dishes, and she was aware of, the best way she could describe it was like a goldfish swimming behind her head, to the point where she had to sort of stop, look behind her, like energetically something swam past her. She paused, and then this happened to her like 2 or 3 times, and then within 24 hours, someone died. So she would get this awareness, she would get this little energetic experience of this goldfish. She would think of someone. Oh, why am I thinking of so-and-so? And then within 24 hours, they would pass away. And by the second time, she was like, okay, I don't like this anymore.
Right. Turn it off, please.
Turn it off, please. But what she realized, and she actually, I don't know if anybody here is familiar with the Edgar Cayce Institute. It's a wonderful organization. But Edgar Cayce was a longtime psychic, long deceased now, but she connected with someone there. And she was like, why is this totally freaking, why is this happening to me? And they just consult her with, you're basically a crossing guard. You're working as a crossing guard with an energy that's transitioning. It's a gift.
Right.
Oh, that sort of helped bring her down. But I want to also just be clear, and that I don't think this is necessarily the golden rule, but I think there's a lot to it. When you're washing the dishes, when you're doing yoga, when you're riding a bicycle, when you're going for a walk or walking your dog, your brainwaves slow down.
Mm-hmm.
And it's the slow down brainwave state where this stuff comes in and is allowed to reach you. And you're in more of a state of allowance. We've mentioned that word a couple times. So when I talk to people, especially students of mine or even clients of mine that want to work on these abilities, I'm like, oh, well, how relaxed are you? If you're driving and pushing, right? We've talked about this conditioning and this drive we have in this culture. Well, that's not how you get there with this stuff. It's not a task.
Right. And the value of play.
Oh, yes.
Which I don't want to get up on a soapbox about electronics, but, really with children, allowing the time to just be creative or be bored.
Yeah.
And for adults, it's the same thing to the time we spend just unplugged and unwired is really, really important, because it's not a sleep state, but it's a different state of consciousness.
Right.
That
like a creative state.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
And we don't really think, there's a great Cheryl Richardson quote, the value of puttering
I love that.
Is greatly, because it's like when we're gardening and our hands, it's doing the dishes or in the shower. Why do all the great ideas come in the shower?
Yeah.
When we're dreaming and we wake up and it was like, wow, that's a great idea. It's because we're off, and the value of off time has really, yeah. And whether it's, it stems from European or the Puritans or what have you, this need to perform and results and outcomes driven.
Right.
But where does the source of the idea come from? And it's from the off time hours.
Truly. And I'll just add to that, say podcasts or not yours, obviously, but like when I was doing all that neuroplasticity stuff, I had an addiction to trauma and drama. I had to literally, so all the devices, the smoking, the eating, the devices, the programs that we're constantly filling ourselves and putting ourselves in front of whatever media and a distraction.
Yeah.
And, I had to recognize in myself, and it's literally biochemically true, that we develop an addiction to adrenaline.
Yes.
And it's way more like addictive than like cocaine or alcohol combined, opioids. It is literally next level kind of addiction, right? Because it's also in your body.
Mm-hmm.
So you have to learn how to turn it off. And that is not, like we talked before about the neuroplasticity, it's not necessarily a straight line, but understanding that, oh, this is an addiction. Like literally, oh, I'm listening to all these political podcasts because, I need a hit. And maybe I could stop doing that.
You're clearly channeling somebody right now, a message for me, because I was a journalism major and I'm current events driven. And so my current trick for myself is to keep the TV on, but on mute.
Oh, that's Interesting. That's a wonderful idea.
So I can see,
That's the sticker tape at the bottom.
Yeah, obviously not when I'm working,
right.
But, if I'm hanging out in the TV room
and you're like everybody else and just like me. And so how can we, and you've taken a massive step just doing that. And how can we, if we are addicted to this stuff, whatever it might be, how do I feel? When I'm watching this, listening to this, engaging with this person, like whatever the input is, come back to your energy and just, ask the question, is this for me?
Yeah. Yeah. Because again, the yucky yum scale,
Right.
it's like eating too much candy.
Right, exactly.
And it's like,
analogy, yeah. We all love candy corns, but at a certain point, your face is going to cave in.
Yeah. And your mouth gets all yucky. And it's like, versus, maybe taking a walk.
Yeah. Oh my God.
Playing with your dog. And
right. Such nurturing. Totally.
So when you're at an event, backyard barbecue, what is one of the greatest misconceptions? How do you share what you do?
Right. How do I share what I do?
Coming from the puritanical backgrounds that, the Great Wasp Way that we do.
Ooh, oh gosh. Let's take a deep breath on the Great Wasp Way. Yes. I will say this. I'm obviously aware of people's judgments. And it's taken me a very, very long time to not shirk away from people's judgments. And I'm now finally up leveling, or whatever you want to call it, where I'm like, ooh, how can I be judged today? How can I invite more of that? How can I create a space for it in my life and not hide? And maybe their judgment of me brings me the goodies, whatever the goodies are. And so that to me is like, and I've absolutely had to play with that and work on that. And I'm not perfect. And I'm still, especially when it comes to family or, whatever, like, right. We want to be that conditioning, that desire to be loved and accepted is a condition. And does it serve us? Hasn't always served me. That's for sure. So maybe I could look for less acceptance, work on more self-acceptance, or not even work, just acknowledge it. Like
This is who I am.
I'm amazing. And I facilitate extraordinary things for complete strangers the world over. That's my reality. So at a backyard barbecue, if somebody doesn't get that, and let's face it, who can, I don't let that diminish me.
Yeah, that's huge.
How much more can I be? How much extra can I be? I'm not dialing at 50 years old. I just turned 50 in July. I'm well beyond trying to dim my light for everyone else's comfort.
Right.
Oh, and I have to read you. You were going to say something. You say something, and then because I have to look up this quote. I watch a lot. I pay a lot of attention to, and it might be one of these fight or flight sort of addictions, but cults. I'm fascinated by cults.
Oh, interesting.
Scientology, Seventh-day Adventist, Mormonism, even Protestantism, right? There's a lot of cultish kind of behavior. I was going to say
tribal.
Totally tribal. And so they're bedrocked in judgment. Absolutely bedrocked. I mean, Catholicism, let's face it, right? I'm sure, Islam and Judaism too, right? There's a lot of judgments inherent in these systems. And I'm fascinated by all of it. And I was also, quote unquote, victim of all of it. I no longer identify as a victim, but boy, have I learned a lot in my exposure to all that stuff.
Particularly as a female.
Oh, yes.
Because absolutely. we're the, as Eve, we're the descendants of Eve. We're the originators of sin.
Bingo.
We're the goddesses of temptation.
Absolutely. And how small that makes us. And look at me. I've taken me 50 years to just say those words. And so, gosh, everyone listening, could you say those words at 22?
Right.
Could you believe them by 28?
Right.
I encourage you to.
Yeah.
I absolutely encourage. I will never forget. My mother told me, and take all this with a grain of salt because, it's passed down, but that my grandmother, this maternal grandmother that had come to me in a dream, and I can't find that quote, unfortunately, but she had said to my mother, I guess, and her siblings, well, I'm 80 now, so I'm going to say whatever is on my mind. And I was like, maybe I was 13 when I heard this. I was like, are you kidding? I've got to wait till I'm 80 years old.
Oh, wow.
Say what that the impact that that had on me was absolutely enormous. And I thought, that's choke worthy, that here she is, an embodied woman, and she had to wait and dial herself down for her entire life. No,
right.
That ain't gonna be me.
Right. And with the beauty of women right now that I'm seeing coming up, I mean, you look at what is happening in Iran, and those generations of women your children are younger than mine. Mine are in their mid-20s. They're true millennials and Gen X, and they're like, no can do.
Right. And these women are risking their lives every single day.
The Iranian women, for sure.
It's blowing my mind.
Yeah.
Absolutely blowing my mind. God bless them.
So what is the favorite part of your work?
Oh, gosh. The favorite part of my work, well, I'll start with one step back. I set an intention, or I asked a question when I was still in that corporate life, where I said to myself, well, what is it that I want? I don't even know what I want. I just know I don't want this. I don't want this corporate life anymore.
Half the battle, though. Absolutely. It's huge to know what you do not want.
Huge. Absolutely. So I was able to determine that. But then, okay, well, where does that leave me? And I literally had this little whisper of a thought show up in my mind, which was, oh, I want to love people for a living. And then the dark comedian showed up in my mind and said, well, prostitutes love people for a living.
That's hilarious.
And I was like, well, maybe not that.
Yeah. A different kind of love.
Exactly. A different kind of love. So it was that sort of funny moment. But essentially what I was able to sort of get out of that was, I just want to be me. I want to get paid for being me. And I've achieved it. I don't, by hook or by crook, I sort of made it up as I went along. I followed the energy. That's probably the best way I can describe it. I followed the energy.
That's of what made you feel alive and soulful.
Yeah, or on a most basic level, what lit me up. And what made me feel contracted. Somebody, even after I started doing the readings, people would reach out to me for media requests. How do I feel about that? Ooh, that kind of makes me feel contracted. That's not the person I'm supposed to work with. Oh, this one makes me zingy. It lights me up. I feel like a glass of Prosecco. I like the energy of that. And so that's literally how I'm making decisions every single day. It's not from this direction of, it's the New York Times, ergo I need to do it. Oh, well, guess what? It was probably a hit piece on, energy workers.
That is so true.
Using the energy of something to determine what's for you and what isn't for you has been huge for me.
Yeah.
And I did it very unconsciously for a long time. And now I'm just much more, I can actually be conscious about how I'm doing this.
Putting it into actual practice.
Right.
Yeah. And decision-making choices, we are the outcome of our choices. So
we absolutely are. Yeah.
We become our choices. So for somebody starting on this path, what particular books, resources? We've talked about access consciousness.
Yeah. I would start, if I were to start my journey all over again today, I whether it's access consciousness or theta healing or reiki, or I wish I had started more from the body, more from an energy in the body standpoint, because when you're working with your own body, you have this intimacy with your body, for better or for worse. And so you're figuring things out for yourself in real time. And I had exactly the opposite experience. I was very cerebral. I was very much in my head. I had very crown-oriented experiences of visions and voices and things like this. But I was very, like I said, I was this 3-year-old child, very much disconnected from my body, disassociated. And so I wish I had started more with the body.
Okay.
So again, whatever energy system works for anybody. I personally love access consciousness. Again, they have their standard session is called the bars session. It's 32 points on the head. They also do a lot of other body work stuff. They have a process called facelift, but they also have the other 50%, I think, of the value that they bring is a lot of verbal processing tools. So they're moving energy with words. And so, and we know, like the conditioning, we've touched on it at multiple points in this conversation, that conditioning, a lot of it, and I'm just understanding this at 50, a lot of it creates agreements within the body and your psyche that is just not cognitive. So no amount of psychotherapy or no amount, if you're like in a 13-year psychotherapeutic relationship and like significant things haven't moved for you in your life, maybe you ought to consider some energy work,
Yeah.
2 years into that journey, right? I demand change. I absolutely demand change. And if I'm not getting change, like I said, I did psychotherapy for a few months. It works really great for some people. I'm not knocking it. I'm not knocking therapists.
Absolutely. Right.
It really works great for a lot of people. But if you're not getting the change, and whether it's your chiropractor or your psychotherapist, like start to look at all that stuff. What can I add? Maybe it's not, I really like going to see this person. I get a lot out of it. So what can you add to your life? It's not necessarily subtractive. It can be an additive process.
Yeah.
So,
and it's approaching what you said earlier, curiosity, asking questions, being willing to experiment, trial and error, using
being willing
the gift.
to get things wrong. We're so conditioned for polarity. This was right. This was wrong. Oh, I made the wrong decision. Oh, I wasted $300. Oh, blah, blah, blah. And we get into this polarity, and that, what does that do? It just locks us up. So all forward momentum, or we judge it. That was me for years, like years and years and years. Oh, energy work, BS. I don't buy it. I don't. I was so really conditioned to believe that was, here I am, a psychic medium, and I'm still believing like, energy work is like nonsense, right? It was just one more layer I had to shed of conditioning, basically.
Right.
And now I'm seeing, and I experience myself so much more holistically. When we spoke earlier, I was doing a lot of coughing. It wasn't until I got off the call that I realized, that's, for me, that's entity awareness.
Oh, interesting.
So when my body experiences, notice I haven't really coughed like at all in this conversation.
No.
And I was dying practically. So I cough a lot, I burp a lot. Thank God it's not a funky kind of burping, but I have an awareness in my, even just now talking about entities, I'm going to acknowledge them so I don't cough again. But I have to acknowledge that, this tingling sensation. What is that?
Yeah. And I just want to say, that is so important to just be aware of what our body, the part of the body, the sensation the body is giving us. And most of the people who know me, and for anybody who's listening to this, listening to me for the first time, I went through a journey with my sinuses. And like you, Emily, I, was absolutely allopathic Western medicine. Don't eat. This was in my 20s, and I was having chronic sinus infections. And so knock, knock, knock. The universe said, you're 18 months on antibiotics is not working. So of course, then I went through sinus surgery, and which was an epic fail. And so then that led me to, okay, I'll try acupuncture. I'll succumb to it. And because I'm desperate. And, I don't know about your audience and client base, but a great portion, not most, I would say a great portion of my client base come because they've tried everything else and they're not getting relief.
And I want to honor that, like that, not giving up, continuing, and whether it's 2 years, 10 years, 20 years, keep going, because you've learned a lot. Keep looking, keep trying, whatever the system is, whatever the modality is, just keep going, because I tell folks that drive it's basically your very being pulling you forward to have all these incredible experiences, to expand you.
Right.
It's
Right.
really powerful.
Right. And rather than viewing it, as you say, judging or as failure or rejection,
Right.
it's a process of elimination. And it's helpful to remember the adage, the universe doesn't say no, it says not right now, or we have something better for you.
Bingo.
And
Love that.
yeah, and what it is stepping fully into your soul and what your soul is here to share, and what makes you glow inside.
Right. And the mystery of it.
The mystery. It's like the magical mystery tour. And so much of our current world, we don't allow for surprise, and
we guard against it.
Right, because it might be a bad thing.
Right.
So it has been so delightful to have you. I mean, the time flew.
Absolutely.
Talking to you as I knew it would. So my guest today is Emily Grote, Grote. She may be reached at emilygrote.com, emily@emilygrote.com. And that brings us to the end of this episode of Mystical Messages. To learn more about my work or to book a session with me, please visit hilaryharley.com. Thank you so much for listening today. Please join me again in 2 weeks when I will bring you my forecast for the month ahead. And I wish you many blessings as you journey forward.